which has been conducted from the Chamber and through the Microsoft Teams platform. It is recommended that under the terms of Section 50A(4) of the Local Government Scotland Act, the public, including the press, be excluded from the meeting during consideration of the following items on the grounds that exempt information as defined in Part 1 of the Schedule 7A of the Act would be disclosed. And that is just item 15. I'm also ruling that items 4, 6 and 16 are urgent to allow the matters to be considered prior to the next meeting of the committee. Can you please ensure your microphones are off? And before we begin, can I now ask Councillor Angus Morrison to lead us in prayer?
Lord God, we come before you this day anew, and we thank you once again for the opportunity that you bestowed upon us, that we are on mercy's ground. We thank you for this opportunity to bring us to the cross and to Calvary this day, Lord, once again. And as we do so, that we would know and acknowledge of this Christ that was crucified for sinners such as we are, one who gave his life freely for sinners, whose blood was shed so that we could live. O Lord, we know that we sin daily in thought, word and action. You are the only avenue which can cleanse us from that sin, Lord. Draw near to us, each one of us this day then, Lord, as we continue this journey of life, a journey that has many twists and turns, and many. A journey that starts differently each day. A journey, although we plan it ourselves, Lord, we know that that plan is not in our hands. It is ultimately in your own hands. We are reminded as we come to the end of a new year, Lord, how quickly time flies and this journey goes on. But that we would look to the end of this journey, Lord, and where we are to be. If we are in Christ, we are a new creature and a new being. You go before us, preparing a place for us. O Lord, we thank you that you do go before us, preparing that place for us. That you are the one who is our Redeemer, and that we can call you a Redeemer, and that you, our Redeemer, lives each day for us. You are a true friend that sticks closer than any brother, one who will not leave us or forsake us. We ask, Lord, that you would bless this council, all that it does in difficult times. Each member, each officer, everyone involved. We pray that you would touch each one intimately this day, Lord. And we know, Lord, that as we come to the end of another year, there are many who mourn empty places at this time in their homes, Lord. Be with them and comfort them. Be with the sick, the suffering, those who are cause for concern and anxiety. Remember our young, Lord, at this time. O Lord, we pray that they would come to know their Creator in their young days. For we know that the flock cannot grow without the lambs, and that is true in our heavenly flock as well. For you are indeed the shepherd of the sheep. We ask that you would bless the leader at this time in this meeting, as he chairs this meeting, Lord. We remember the convener, chief executive, all officers and the duties that they perform, each member present and at home, Lord, listening in. O Lord, be with each and every one of us. Continue to do us good, and that we could truly say as we come to the end of another year that you have been with us and that you have, and hitherto you have helped us. Go before us now, Lord, in the rest of this day in our deliberations. Pardon us freely for our many sins. Amen.
Thank you, Angus. You'll all now be well versed in the conduct of the meeting, and just remind you of a couple of things. That is that if you're a member of the committee attending remotely, can you please leave your camera on and your microphone off? And officers, please leave both off unless you're called to speak, to report or answer a question. Again, camera and mic on then. And a reminder to those members in the chamber of the queuing system, the way it works is that if you ask a question, please leave your mic on in case you wish to come back for a response. And as usual, committee members will be given priority. And in regard to declarations of interest, members must leave the chamber or end the call remotely. And finally, of course, a reminder that the meeting has been live streamed and recorded, and the recording will, of course, be made available on the Council's website following the meeting. Thank you. Can I just make a couple of briefing notes at the start of the meeting, which I think will interest all members. The first one concerns social care services and retention and recruitment. I did say that we would come back to PNR this week about this matter. As promised in the email last week from Malcolm and myself, we held a meeting with the Council IJB members and officers to look at ways in which we could enhance support for our social care employees, including their terms and conditions, both to show the value we place on them and to increase our chances of retention and future recruitment in that vital service. We had a very useful and profitable and positive meeting with staff and good input from the team that run the service. I'm pleased to report that there is work already underway with our specialist care consultant to explore quickly, and I mean quickly, options regarding pay and terms and conditions. These options, which we can anticipate can be utilised fairly quickly, will include split shift payments, weekend enhancements, market supplements, shift allowances, lone worker enhancements, and standby rates. These would all deliver substantive and quantifiable benefits to our employees, and we are all aware that we all want that to happen. All that work requires consultation with our recognised trade unions, and we have to be sure that it's within a pay model as served as well. But none of these proposals we don't anticipate them. We're confident that these enhancements will not breach the pay model. It's also important to note that social care employees' issues are not all about pay, and we've discussed this in this chamber previously. And so in order to measure overall job satisfaction, we will issue a survey to all social care employees this Friday to understand their priorities around pay, terms and conditions, work patterns, management support and training. We hope to get the results of that survey before the end of the year. We will also undertake recruitment drives early in the year and look in detail about career progression, increased training, access to pool vehicles and anything else which will help our employees. Much of this work is already part of our policy framework, but we are agreed to give it all our strongest push forward, and I think all members would agree with that. So that is where we're at the minute. Immediate fixes around pay and conditions, asking staff what other things we need to improve, and then cracking on with that. So I hope that members will be happy to support that course of action and let us push on with it. Are you happy with that, members? Thank you for that. Carl McLean, Councillor Carl McLean.
Yes, Leader, thanks for that. I mean, I'm not a member of your committee, as you know. You talk about a survey being conducted this Friday amongst personnel. Is that survey going to be anonymous?
Oh, I can confirm. I'm sure the Chief Executive will. The survey will not be conducted by management within the department. It'll be conducted independently by Human Resources. It'll be anonymised and non-attributable. So we do get as clear and unambiguous a picture as we can, so it'll inform our actions going forward, which I believe was the view expressed in the chamber last week.
Thanks very much. That's more encouraging. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor McLean. And Councillor Ray McKenzie.
Thanks, Leader. I'm not on your committee, but it's just one question. I think when we raised this in the past, particularly about the pay conditions of social care workers, we were advised that this wasn't possible because it would mean a change in the conditions of all the other grades. Has something changed on this? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm quite happy for the Chief Executive to just amplify that for you.
Yes, it's not possible simply to raise pay for one group of employees over any other group of employees, because single status is all about equivalence of work. And as the Leader alluded to, that's what's given some councils, Glasgow famously, massive equal pay problems over the years. So it's not about increasing the pay of social care workers. It's about looking at what we can do that's discretionary, that's allowable within the pay model without, say, raising them from grade X to grade Y, because that wouldn't be possible for any single group of employees. So that's the difference. We're looking at what we can do within the pay model. And when we look back to when we set up the pay model, there were always quite a lot of discretionary payments, which we chose at that time not to implement and which we'll now look at again.
Okay, you understand that, Mr. McKenzie?
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Chief Executive, for that. I still don't understand why that could not have been done when we raised this in the past. has something changed?
Yeah, what's changed is we're now deciding to do something about it and use whatever tools we have at our disposal to improve the income that is generated by these care workers. And I think members are happy to proceed on that basis. Yes? Thank you. One other item I want to talk about before we go into the agenda proper is additional investment. And I think it's just to reflect on some good work that's been done over the past recent months by council officers. Over the past month, council officers have been successful in attracting a significant level of additional external funding into a range of critical local projects. And I want to take just a minute to highlight these to you to remind ourselves of them, or you may not be aware of them as members of the committee. First of all, the Recycling Improvement Fund. Municipal Services submitted a bid to the Scottish Government's Recycling Improvement Fund. The aim of the bid is to improve recycling rates, improve collection efficiency, and improve feedback for the anaerobic digester, whilst reducing waste materials that cannot be recycled. We are pleased that just over £784,000 has been awarded, and it will allow the provision of a zero-emissions electric refuse collection vehicle, 30 glass banks, and the wheelie bins needed to roll out our new curbside collection services, which again, all members have been anxious to see progressed. That'll happen in all areas of the Outer Hebrides that don't currently have a service. The second one I want to mention is the Regeneration Capital Grant Fund. As you know, over the past period, the Economic Development Services Regeneration team were successful on several bids on behalf of community enterprises. These included the Leverhulme Community Hub, Knocksullar, Great Bernard Marina, Uris Storrs and Roo, Carloway Community Association, etc. During the last few months, each of these projects were impacted by additional cost issues arising from the COVID pandemic and acceleration of costs due to supply chain issues. Again, something we've been aware of in the Chamber. Officers made a case to Scottish Government for additional resources above the original awards for the 5 projects. An additional funding Regeneration Capital Grant Fund was awarded of £810,000. This brings the total RCGF award for the projects up to £4 million and will allow these projects to progress when it looked as if they might well have stalled. That's very good work there. In terms of the Energy Hub, the Green Growth Accelerator issue, the Council recently applied to the Scottish Government and Scottish Future Trust for Green Growth Accelerator GGA programme for support with its Net Zero Hub project. The project has now been confirmed as one of 5 GGA pathfinders to be supported through the fund and will get £120,000 of funding in the current financial year, and that will be followed by hopefully £10 million of funding from 22-23 towards substantive project costs. This, of course, is in addition to the £11 million already allocated through the island's growth deal. GGA support will go towards the construction of a service site and electrolysis infrastructure at the Net Zero Hub, supplying green electricity from a demonstration floating offshore wind platform in the Minch. And the final one I want to just mention is Local Bridge Maintenance Fund. As you know, we've been pursuing the government for assistance on this for a couple of years now. We had very positive feedback from Kate Forbes early on, which compensated for the fact that we weren't making much headway with Michael Mallison. So we're very pleased at this outcome. In June, the Scottish Government announced additional capital funding of £32 million for local bridge maintenance. Applications were prepared and submitted by our team at the Council for investment in the top 10 priority road structures which fell within the brief. The £32 million fund received 131 applications from 25 local authorities, oversubscribing the scheme by over £75 million. However, the Council was successful with 6 applications amounting to £6.66 million, the highest allocation to any individual authority. This will allow investment of £2.62 million towards the £3.3 million cost of replacing the bridge to Bernera, which I'm pleased to say will open next week, and will enable essential works to be carried out at Calbust, Marrick, Scalpy Bridge, North Ford, Lochnoe. These works will either replace or increase the life of existing bridge structures. So in summary, we have their total funding of over £11.5 million, which has been secured for immediate investment with a prospect of an additional £10 million for future investment down the line. And I just want to acknowledge the work of the key officers involved along with their teams, and these were David MacLeod, David McLeay, John Cunningham and Callum Mackenzie. And one final item which I would like your agreement to before we move on. In line with the arrangement successfully implemented in 2020, I would recommend that the Council agrees to provide free parking in Percival Square car park limited to a maximum period of 2 hours for the period from 17 December 21 to 5th January 22 to help support local businesses during the festive period. Are members happy to agree that recommendation, which is basically a repetition of that? Happy to agree? Good. Okay, thank you for that, and I hope you found that update useful and encouraging. We'll now move on to the formal business of the agenda. First of all, there's a minutes of the meeting of 29 September 2021 for approval as to accuracy. Happy to agree, thank you. Item 2, you're invited to declare an interest in any agenda item at this point. If you become aware of an interest during the meeting, then I'd ask you to declare it at that time. When declaring an interest, it would be helpful if members could indicate briefly the nature of that interest. This helps to make our decision making more open and transparent for the public. Members in the chamber, please do so by pressing your microphone on or through remotely through Teams by raising the raised hand function. Please ensure the declaration is repeated prior to the relevant item and that you adhere to the protocol as previously indicated. We should all be well versed in that now. Councillor Lucian Robertson.
Can I declare an interest in item number 6, the UK government funds? I'm a chair of Commonwealth Tour, which is one of the groups involved in the Clough bid.
Okay, thank you for that. No further declarations of interest. Okay, thank you very much. Next one we have, item 3, is the minute of the meeting of the Community Planning Partnership of the 19th of August 2021 for noting. Happy to note. Thank you. Also, the item 4, the minute of meeting of Human Resources Committee of 2nd December 2021 for noting. Happy to note. Thank you. Now we move on to performance management. The following reports provide an overview of the business plans and related performance issues at the end of the second quarter 2021-22. We have Malcolm Barr, Chief Executive, Norman MacDonald, Paul McCaskill, Ian McKinnon. They can highlight key points and answer any questions on their respective remits. So, first of all, 5A, Chief Executive Department, Corporate Policy and Performance Management Update. Over to you, Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be as brief as I can because it's a fairly full report. In terms of the business plan actions at para 6.2, 50 out of the 52 are on track and nothing to worry about with the other 2. With the KPIs, the key performance indicators, 6.3, there's 23 of these, 10 of them are on target and 13 have annual reporting, so that'll come back to the newly elected council in June. But as far as I'm aware, there's nothing of concern. Paragraph 7 on our focus there on sickness absence days. There was a very full report to HR subcommittee at its last meeting, and that's available to you. That there have been quite a lot of improvements in these figures. Of course, the Corla will always be at the high end of national sickness absence figures because of our in-house delivery of social care, which isn't the case in much of Scotland. So we have that workforce to account for, and of course, for obvious reasons, there is generally a higher sickness absence rate among social care workers owing to the nature of the work, but all in hand and all reducing, which is good. Budget-wise, the department is forecast to come in on budget. I have to draw your attention to 9.2 to the significant savings target of over 10%. We will, with your help, meet these. Obviously, the department's costs are mainly salary costs, and achieving these savings is only possible by the means set out in that paragraph. But we will meet these savings, which is an achievement. Moving on to policy areas, separate report on the agenda on Community Renewal Fund and Levelling Up Fund. The structural funds replacement landscape still looks quite confused. Nothing on Shared Prosperity Fund. You've heard me say that on many occasions. There is to be a paper in the new year. I gathered early in the new year. We have heard that before, but I think it is expected in January or February, and we'll report to you, of course, as soon as we can, because the Corley may need to take decisions about bids to that fund either before the election or certainly immediately after it. So we'll come back to you as quickly as we can on that. Community Renewal Fund, you'll remember, was a precursor to Shared Prosperity Fund. Whether that's continued to cover next year, who knows? But Shared Prosperity Fund remains on the horizon. A lot of work going on transport at political level and in policy terms, and that's referred to there. A lot of, you're all familiar with the recent press releases we've done, both on service levels, particularly on the North Uist and Harris services, and in relation to the appointments to the board of David McBrain Limited, and the chair and officers continue to work very hard in that area. Energy and climate change, there's a very full briefing there. I'll let that speak for itself. Crown Estate, I wrote to you earlier this week, and then updated that with the actual sum that we'd been awarded, which was helpful. We will report back in February, as I've said, but if there are any projects which are existing and up and running projects which are dependent on phase 3 funding, there's a mechanism there for either the project organisers or indeed yourselves to approach David Macleay in the first instance, and we'll look at that sympathetically and with a view to homologation in February. But there will be a full report reflecting the substantial review report. On a quick reading of that, as I've said, the Corley comes out very well, and I'd be horrified if we didn't, because we were among the first councils to move that funding straight to communities, and we did very well with that. We acknowledged at the time we might want to refine the criteria in the light of our own corporate strategies. This is our money. What government says is guidance, and we have to respect that and take that into account. But it is local authority money to distribute, and the report will reflect that in February. But good news, another 1.7 million, which is akin to what we received in year 1. I think we all recognise that year 2 was something of a bonus. Nothing moving, sadly, on public services other than the National Care Review, and my thanks again to all members for their high level of engagement in that debate. There was 27 members at the seminar and 28 members at the Special Council, and I do appreciate the time given to that, because it's potentially the most significant change to public sector governance and delivery in some time. Those are all the points I want to bring to your attention, Chair. So I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you for that, Chief Exec. Convener?
Thank you, Chair, and thank to Malcolm for this. In terms of the Crown Estate funding, it's acknowledged that it's come in much later this time around for this current financial year, and it's clear as well that the government are looking for the green agenda to be a significant part of that. But the reality is, the Crown Estate revenues that are raised right across the coastline of the Outer Hebrides is one of the most significant in the whole of the UK in terms of the money that goes into the Treasury in Westminster with regard to that. So I do think that we acknowledge what's been put before us, but as Malcolm said, we need to take advice from government as to what we need in our community, and that advice should be based on what our priorities are, more so than what the Westminster government are having. So it's just to ask the Chief Executive, if we can reinforce that aspect of what he's just said in terms of the Crown Estate revenues. Thank you, Chair.
Yep, agreed. I agree with the convener on that one, and I think it is guidance, and it might be indicators to give us, but it's in our power to do what we think is best for these islands. I'm sure none of us would want to do anything that would be particularly anti the green agenda anyway. So, and we have never displayed that sort of behaviour. So the issue around that is, yeah, let's, those projects that are either underway or committed or part of the discussion with your communities, let's make sure they're logged and proceed with getting the data in on them before the end of January, say. Not done, not completed or spent, but just, you know, make sure that it's in the system. And David McLeod's the first point of contact. Councillor Gordon Murray.
Hey, thank you, Chair. Good morning, and thank you, Chief Executive, for the report. It was just a quick question on section 9.3. It says, to meet savings, the department had 2 vacant posts at the beginning of the financial year, generating 74,000 savings. 1 post has now been used to fund apprenticeships, and 1 post, which is vacant due to a secondment, is in the process of being released. Just for my own information, can I ask when these were decided upon and at what committee? Thanks.
Chair, I'll ask Norma Skinner to speak to the first point, but the second one is the post which is vacant due to the secondment of Anne Murray as Islands Deal Programme Director. So that is simply a secondment which the Corla, Orkney and Shetland have agreed, and that has to be filled since the post holder came from our council. So that's a simple release of post. There was, of course, a technical saving because the post holders, the programme director's salary is met 3 ways by Orkney, Shetland and ourselves. So there's a saving there, but that's a post we need to fill because we are one policy officer down. My recollection is that the Corla has a policy in place to support apprenticeships wherever possible, but Ms Skinner will assist me there, I think.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair and Chief Executive. Yes, we do. We've got a programme for apprenticeships, and we have a fund in place to support the promotion of apprenticeships where required. Apprenticeship posts are usually for a year, so they can be released through corporate workforce panel, but if there's any other questions, happy to take them.
Okay. Any further questions for Norma, what she said?
Thank you for that. It was just a question on the savings. I thought they would come back to committee so that committee could decide where to use them. But are you saying that it was just earmarked and used for this without committee approval?
Chair, just to assist further, they're savings for this year, but they're posts that are on the establishment. So it's just noting that for this year's budget, yeah, which will come in on track, we have needed those fortuitous sums of money.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay, if we can move on, then there's no further questions for the Chief Executive's report. You want?
Chair, sorry, I missed one item out, Chair, if you'd allow me back in, just to say Scottish Government's meeting with COSLA on 5th of October. I should have referred to that on COVID recovery. It was quite a strategic meeting, and Government indicated its 3 points for the COVID recovery phase, very much focused on alleviation of poverty and inequality, opportunities for young people, as we would expect, and green jobs, as it's put. But the main focus was on the alleviation of poverty and inequality. Our policies, I think, are in a good place to support that work, and that will be joint work, collaboratively led jointly by Scottish Government and local government through COSLA. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you for that. So can we now move on to 5B, which is the report in terms of strategic finance, accountancy and exchequer services. I'm not sure if Norman is available. Norman, do you wish to give a quick overview of that? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I don't really have much to add. Our targets are largely based around the annual account cycle and the budget cycle, and also in recommendations from internal audit reports. So at this stage, there isn't anything really significant to report. There are a couple of internal audit points that we're still working on, but we hope to get these finalised within the next couple of months. At section 7 of the report, there's a reference to the local government benchmarking framework. As part of this, we had intended to look at 3 of the indicators that showed that we needed to do a bit of improvement. Work on this hasn't progressed as quickly as I would have hoped due to other priorities within the section, but I would hope to get this completed by the end of the financial year. Apart from that, there's nothing significant in the reports, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that, Norman. Anybody got any questions for Norman there? No? Okay. If we can now move on to item C, which is internal audit and a report from, is Paul with us, Chief Internal Auditor? Or no? If there's any questions on that particular one, Norman will be able to cover that, but it's fairly routine as far as I can see, just about standard report. Yeah, happy with that. And then we've got, last one is Ian McKinnon. I think Ian is with us, the Director for Investment Delivery, just to give an overview of his own area. Ian?
Good morning, all. Yes, I mean, in terms of investment delivery, with regard to revenue expenditure, we are currently underspending against profile for the half year, but members will see that we're talking about very small numbers in terms of revenue expenditure, with the main focus for ourselves being capital, but there are certainly no areas of concern. Performance indicators for investment delivery relate to the development and delivery of 4 major projects, and there are summary updates provided in Appendix 1. Goat Hill progress remains very good. There are some continuing delays being encountered by the contractor due to the availability of materials, and more recently the impact of weather and vessel deployment and unplanned interruptions on ferry services on the Stornoway Ullapool route. Contractor is now envisaging completion mid-April with the commissioning and the handover to Health and Social Care colleagues during the early summer next year. And just as an aside, as some members will be aware, that the Audit and Scrutiny Committee yesterday considered the findings of an internal audit review, which in respects of the role of investment delivery were, I'm pleased to say, very positive. There is a concurrent report at item 16 on the Barra project. With regard to Lochmaddy, the award of the revised main works contract has been delayed slightly by Transport Scotland's approval of their final business case. It was to have been considered by the Investment Decision Making Board yesterday, but that's now been rescheduled to mid-January. It has required us to seek bidders' approval for extensions to the tender validity period to the middle of February next year, and that in turn has cost and programme implications. We currently envisage the award of the contract in February next year, construction start in March, and a completion a year later in March 2023. It's always the intention that the project remains cost neutral to the Comorla. That intention remains in place. And in parallel to the award of the main works contract, it will be necessary for us to conclude a funding agreement with Transport Scotland, taking into account that the 80% grant and aid we're getting and the balance being raised through prudential borrowing, which is in turn funded by increased harbour dues levied on CalMac. Last but not least is the Benadryl project. The construction works are proceeding well. Elements of the construction have been hampered slightly by the current more recent inclement weather, and we are envisaging completion of the main works by the end of March. Happy to take any questions. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you for that, Ian. Any questions for Mr. McKinnon? Probably been through most of these at Transport. Okay. Thank you very much for that. So are members therefore happy to note these 4 reports? Performance Manager, thank you. We now move on to item 6, which is about UK government funds. This report details the outcome of the bid submitted by the Council to the Community Renewal Fund, CRF, and provides an update on the Council's proposed Culture and Heritage bid to the £20 million Levelling Up Fund, LUF. The Council submitted a bid to the CRF in June 21, and 2 projects in the Western Isles were approved: Horseder Community Asset Development and Port of Ness Harbour Development, to a total value of 166,000. The Council did not submit a bid to the first round of the LUF, although it intends to do so at the second round, and these funding deadlines have not yet been announced. This report concerns the Council's proposed bid for LUF funding of up to £20 million. The detail is in the report, and there is a recommendation for approval at paragraph 3.1 of the report. Angus, I don't know if Angus Murray is in. Angus, do you want to speak to the report?
Thanks, Chair. Just very briefly, the main purpose of the report really is to agree that Ballinvarchy Community Campus is included in the LUF bid, which will probably be submitted in spring of next year, because at the moment it's not included in the consultant's draft bid. So that really is the important aspect of this report, to agree that it is included in due course. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Anybody got any questions for Angus or any comments? There's recommendations there that we just note the progress for the application for LUF funding and agree that Ballinvarchy Community Campus is included within the application to the LUF to a value of 2.9. Everybody happy to agree these recommendations? Councillor McCormack?
Thank you very much, Leader. I just have been looking at the agenda, the addition to the report, the appendix, which shows the awards across Scotland, and we haven't come out of that terribly well. I just don't understand why we are so far down the league as far as this is concerned. The amount of money going to Argyll and Bute, for example, is substantially over anything that we have achieved. And discussions have taken place, as I understand from Angus's report. What I don't understand is what exactly was the reason given for why we had only 2 small projects agreed when other areas have got a whole pile of projects, only one of which their projects covered more than the amount of money that we were given.
Yeah. Okay, can you come back on that, Angus?
Yes, we did. Well, really equally disappointed, and so indeed is everyone that was involved in the submission of the bid, the overall bid, and also the component bids. A lot of work was put in by community groups. We were a priority 1 area for this fund. We did have a meeting with Scotland Office officials. They did not provide any specific feedback on why some of these bids, or most of these bids, were unsuccessful. What they did say was that they will provide an overview of process to us within the next week or 2. The interesting aspect of this is that Scottish Government had no involvement at all in this process. They had been asked to provide commentary on the bids. There were about 177 bids Scotland-wide, but Scottish Government did not provide any commentary at all. So that was new information, because the rumour was otherwise. But yeah, apart from Argyll and Bute, which secured nearly £3 million or so, the Highlands and Islands generally was not that successful as a region, and even Scotland in the global scale of things, or in the national scale of things, it wasn't very successful either. So we hope that's not going to continue, and we'll be doing our best to work with consultants to ensure that the LUF bid in spring of next year has the best possible chance of success, and that includes a specific transport bid and also the cultural bid that we're talking about, which is the subject of this report. And we would also hope that the successor to the Community Renewal Fund, Shape Prosperity Fund, we would hope that we as a council and as a region would fare reasonably well in submissions to that fund over the next 6 or 7 years. Thanks.
Yeah, I think also it's worth saying that it sort of refers back to the point that the Chief Executive was making, that some of these funds and some of these, the structure around them is still so woolly and so difficult to determine. And it seems a wee bit sort of capricious the way they allocate money. We were led to believe, for example, as Angus just said, that Scottish Government would have an input to that, and that all these bids would be run by. And in that context, I think we had reasonable optimism because they're well across all these bids and the stuff that we've been involved in working with government. So it is one of these things, perhaps a lesson learned. I mean, it's not an end game. We have to go back in again and maybe have to restructure how we do it. And the feedback that Angus and his team will get in the next fortnight will inform that. So hopefully next time round that the bid criteria will be clearer, the judging will be clearer, and we'll know exactly how to present these bids. So next time round.
But may I ask? I mean, I remember that this was a rush job. Really, we had to do it in a very short time scale. It would be very useful to communities who are putting in bids to have a longer lead-in time and a clear indication of what it is the government is actually looking for.
Yeah, that's our ambition too. Have we had any word on that, Angus? I know that was an issue previously, or is it going to be as chaotic the next time round with short time frames and then a lack of ability to put together coherent bids? Do you want to come in?
Yes, thanks. These comments are exactly right. I mean, CRF was an extremely rushed job, and I think it was introduced by UK government to recognise that an unseemly amount of time had passed without any replacement for structural funds. So whether it appeals again at all, or whether it is caught up in Shared Prosperity Fund, we will find out early in the new year. But it's clear from the evidence, I think, that there are the process is capable of being influenced in other ways, as other than through the application process, which was undoubtedly rough and ready, and we will respond to that accordingly.
Okay, thanks for that. There are recommendations for approval of paragraph 3.1. Happy to approve. Thank you very much. On to item 7, which is the corporate business continuity. This report seeks approval of the corporate business continuity plan. The corporate business continuity plan CBCP provides high-level direction on the council services that require immediate response in the event of an emergency. The CBCP is appended to the report and will be subject to review every 6 months. Rebecca McLeod, will be here to answer any members' questions. Members got any questions for Rebecca?
Thanks, Chair. This was approved by Audit and Scrutiny Committee.
It was, okay. In that case, we're happy to approve at 3.1. Thank you very much. Item 8 is concerns assisted dying for terminally ill adults Scotland Bill. This is a report from the Chief Executive, which provides details of the consultation on a proposal for an assisted dying for terminally ill adults Scotland Bill, and to consider the terms of a council response, if any, to the consultation. There are recommendations for approval at 3.1, but before that, perhaps Mr. Bird can speak to the report.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be brief because the report, I think, speaks for itself. But first of all, just a reminder about our practice, usually for legislation of this kind, which is not our direct responsibility, although if passed, of course, it would bring responsibilities to health and social care employees particularly. Our usual practice is simply for me to bring the Act or the bill to the attention of you all, as you know, and invite you to submit individual comments if and as you see fit. However, the subject matter of this bill has assumed a greater prominence in recent years in legislative and policy-making spheres, and the CORLA has received an unprecedented number of requests for expression of a view. I know members have various views on the matter, so I thought it right to bring the matter to your attention. But of course, the first recommendation is to note it. The second one is to consider whether you wish to submit a corporate response or whether you wish to adhere to our usual practice of individual responses from elected members. In any case, the consultation period ends on 22nd December, and of course, if the Parliament approves the bill for legislation, there would then be the full parliamentary consultation. I think it's well known the strong views on both sides of this important policy question. As I've said, we've received a number of representations as well as expressions, requests for an expression of a political view. If you wish to submit a response, the main arguments for and against, at least as I see them, are summarised in 5.3 and 5.4. Of course, there may well be other policy considerations, and you as individuals, of course, may have views based on your own positions and convictions, but those are the principal arguments. And if you're minded to submit a response either way, recommendation C, which would authorise me to submit a response on your behalf, would be drawn from these arguments, whichever ones we choose to adopt. So this is really a choice for you, first of all, whether to submit a corporate response, and if so, along which lines. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. So just turning to recommendations, so we're clear. Recommendation 3.1a, first of all, was simply to note that the consultation by Liam MacArthur, and then second and third, more importantly, we want to consider whether the council wishes to submit a corporate response to the consultation, and in the event that we do wish to submit a corporate response, would we be happy to authorise the Chief Executive to submit a response to the consultation based on the views expressed at the meeting. So that's just in summary. Can we, Gordon Murray, do you want to contribute?
Thank you, Chair. I'd sincerely like to thank the Chief Executive for the approach taken in setting out the context of this bill and the way this report has been written and presented. We all know it's a very sensitive issue and needs to be treated very sensitively, and I believe that this report has done that. Firstly, I would like to state that it should not be called assisted dying, but assisted suicide. Because when people are coming to the end of their life, the care, especially good in these islands, assist their last few moments. But what this bill would do is a voluntary taking of life rather than the palliative care that we should be seeking to improve. I would also say that this report covers most of the main arguments for and against, but my own chief concern is the one that's noted. Inevitably, and regardless of intention, assisted dying, suicide, puts pressure on people to end their lives for fear of being a financial, emotional, or care burden to others. And as we're always pretend to be championing the elderly, this is a very serious matter that needs serious consideration, because it's not so hard to imagine this happening when, say, elderly parents start losing their faculties, mental and physical, and coupled with the financial strain a lot of families are under, suicide could be seen as the honourable way. I strongly believe that everyone should have the right to live from conception to their elderly years, and this should be not only respected but protected. If this law was abused, elderly people would die, innocent people would die for possibly financial reasons. So in terms of the process, Chair, I would strongly support a corporate view rejecting this bill, and where members not in agreement, they should respond themselves. And in both instances, I believe our electorate should know where each and every one of us stands on this very, very important issue. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, quite clear on your own view on that, Councillor Murray. Thank you very much for that. Anybody else got any views they want to express at this juncture? Or a Councillor Finlay Stewart.
Thank you, Leader. I'll be very brief. I'd like to thank Chief Executive for this report, and I totally agree with all that Gordon has said. And I think corporate view should be to oppose this proposed bill. I think it's the thin end of a wedge that could see the same happening here as has happened in Canada, where in 2023 you won't have to be terminally ill to have this option. It could apply to disabled people, people of old age, and people with mental health issues. And some doctors would have probably have to be instructed to tell patients that this is an option for them. But I think for the vulnerable it would become a duty rather than an option. So I will email the Chief Executive later on with my own thoughts on it, but I just wanted to add that. Thanks.
Thank you, Finlay. Appreciate your views. Councillor Norman MacDonald.
Yeah, thanks again, Leader. I'm not a member of this committee, and thanks to the Chief Executive for this report. I quickly fired back an email to the Chief Executive with my own views, but I will not be taking them forward without consulting with members in my ward, with the electorate in the ward. So I'll get a broad-based opinion before submitting a view from the ward and point. I'm sure Finlay and others will probably be doing the same. You know, I wouldn't like to put my view, individual view, forward without the consultation of electorate. So I will be putting it on our own members' Facebook page and looking forward to respondents' views on it. So I'll get back to Malcolm again on that.
Excellent. If you get back directly to the Chief Executive. Thank you. Councillor Roddy Mackay.
Thanks, Chair. Roddy Mackay, North Euston Membeka, not a member of your committee. I think this is a very, very emotive subject. It's something that I would rather we didn't just have a corporate response to. It's something that should really, if there was ever a consultation that's needed to find out what the public actually want, this is the one that they should have the last word on. We will all have our own views on the subject. I think it's one that we definitely need to get the views of the public before we decide on a corporate structure to put them in a position. So they need to be the people that have the last word.
Okay, thank you for that, Rory. Councillor McCormack.
Thank you, Leader. Well, I wonder if those who have spoken before me have actually sat at someone's bed and watched them die in pain.
Yeah.
It's a very difficult situation indeed, and I absolutely 100% agree that there should be an opportunity for people to take the choice to die if they are in considerable pain. And I would certainly, had this affected me not so long ago, I would certainly have gone to every effort to assist my wife to die free from pain. In the event she did, she also wanted to die in her own bed, and she did that as well. So there are all sorts of issues surrounding this, and I do appreciate that it's a very emotional matter. This is intended for people who are compos mentis, people who are able to take their own decisions about their life. It's not about killing old people off. It's not about my daughter killing me for my money. That's not the kind of thing, and that's really what Gordon is alluding to. That is not what it's about at all. This is about allowing people who are perfectly sane, who have assessed their situation, who realize that for the rest of their life they're going to be living in serious pain, and they want to do something about it. I think they should have the right to do that. And I think this council should be saying that people should have the right to do that.
Thank you for that, Angus. A very personal issue for yourself. Okay, we've had some views. Sorry, Alistair.
Thank you.
Councillor Alistair MacLeod.
As I've just heard from Councillor McCormack, it's a very, very emotive and a personal issue. I personally agree with Mr. MacDonald that we should consult with population at large. We have people at both ends of the spectrum. This has been debated for years and years. Personally, I'm against it because I think it is like at an end of the wedge. But when we hear personal experiences, it's a different gloss, a different perspective on the matter entirely. So it's not an easy kind of debate at all. But I think we should submit a corporate response and take into account the views of the whole community. Thank you.
Is there Kenny John MacLeod?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I have no difficulty whatsoever in stating my own views, and it is a personal view that I'm not at all in favour of this from a faith point of view. And I have had experience of a privilege of being with people at the end of their life. And I think it's totally distracting the focus away from end of life and palliative care measures that have made great advances over the recent years. And in the vast majority of cases, people are supported at that end of life with fantastic care locally, particularly, and many of us have experience of that. Now, the assisted suicide proposal is really not at all enabling us to look at the broad picture of the support that can and is being offered on a day-to-day basis, and the need to make sure that that support is at appropriate levels locally and nationally, and that there is a proper programme in place to make sure that that is the case. I very much appreciate people's personal experiences, and they can be different, they can be emotive, they're based on very, very painful memories sometimes as well. But I also have seen people who have made that transition from life to death in a very peaceful way, supported by a very carefully planned care plan and having care workers and medical staff around about them. So I think I would not want people to have an impression that there is abandonment at the end of life and that it's necessarily a painful transition, when there are very good end-of-life care packages available and supporting families throughout our islands and throughout the land even. I think this is polarising views, and I think it is a dangerous path to tread. And I know people say it's not this and it's not that, but I think we know that things can, once legislation is passed, it's very difficult to pull back when things go in a different direction to what we expected. So I would certainly not, on a personal level, be supporting this. I've not had any indication from any of the electorate in my own area to support it, and have had representations fact to the contrary. So if we are to provide a council view, and there may be different views, it might be quite difficult to determine what that view is. And if that is the case, I think I would favour not making a view by the council and allowing members to make representation based on their own conscience and on consultation with the electorate.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I think that's a fairly balanced view, which tends towards my own view, which is that whilst I personally wouldn't be able to support it, I see there's a range of views from members, and I think it would be probably more effective for individuals, and after maybe they've consulted their own communities, to individual councillors to make their own representations. But we can come back to that when we tidy up at the end. We don't want the issue to become whether or not the council submits a response. The issue is a serious issue. We have to deal with it in the most sensitive way possible. And if that comes to individuals contributing directly to the consultation rather than corporately, then that's what we'll do, whatever is the right thing. Councillor Manford, and then Mr. Fairs, is it? Yeah, Councillor Manford.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be brief. I don't support this. I certainly respect the call for people to have the right in principle, and I understand very clearly why that should be. However, I firmly believe that there will not be sufficient safeguard. There simply won't, for a lot of the reasons have been said already, particularly by Gordon Murray at the outset. So for that reason alone, perhaps I couldn't see my way to support it. I don't think that the council, that I agree with your own view. I don't think that the council should put a corporate view in. Certainly not at this stage. because that will be that there would not be a consistent view for a whole host of reasons. And there may be need further on for a corporate view to be presented. We don't know when that will be or what it might be surrounding. So I think as a corporate organisation, we should hold back just now on presenting a view, but I will certainly present my own.
Thank you, Donald. Yeah, that's where I feel that we're sitting at the minute. Mr. Fair.
So kind of thank you. I'll be kind of brief. So I think if there is to be a kind of consultation process, then we should, as Kenny John was kind of referencing, we should be including our palliative and end of life kind of care kind of team and the expertise that kind of sits within there. And I think more widely from an ethical kind of standpoint, I recognise it is probably an individual kind of decision, but we should also look to elsewhere in kind of Europe and perhaps draw some of those kind of considerations into just that consultation process. Thank you.
Thank you. You want to come in?
Chair, just for guidance on that, it is many of the requests for a view from the corner have come from palliative care organisations. They're among the most vociferous campaigners on this, I suppose. Just to put members right on consultation, the consultation period for this bill ends on 22nd December, so there would be no time to engage really in any meaningful consultation on this. But of course, if this bill advances, there would be a full consultation through the Scottish Parliament's procedures, which would include everyone and anyone.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that's the stage we're at the minute, and there will be a full consultation, and detailed consultation if it does proceed further. So we're at a very early stage. So I don't think that there is anything incumbent on us to submit a corporate response at the minute. I think the recommendations are saying consider whether the council wishes to submit a corporate response, and then subject to the council's view on that, authorise the chief executive to submit a response. I mean, the feeling I'm getting at the minute is that we do not wish to submit a corporate response. Individual members can certainly consult with their own, in whatever level they wish, their own communities to the community councils, and submit their own individual responses and maybe responses for the communities. And we may revisit this once any formal consultation comes out from Scottish Government, if it reaches that stage. And I think that's the wisest way to deal with this issue at the minute. Are members happy to agree that way forward? Convener?
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, I'm certainly not in favour of the proposal, and I also have had some time ago. I think every one of us have had a personal experience about that, and the one thing I'm confident about is that the medical profession, they are the ones who recognise where somebody is in severe pain, and they moderate that pain, and generally for certain categories of people who have a very clear terminal illness, it's usually that they let that go until it is inevitable what is going to happen. And sometimes people could be in a position where they can't even drink water for a week before they pass away, and yet they're still comfortable in their own surroundings with their family around them generally, and certainly I wouldn't be supporting this.
Okay, I think we've got John Mackay and then Gordon Murray, and then perhaps I think we're agreed on a way forward. John?
Well, I'll certainly be opposing this, because I don't think this is the way that we should do, because this is leaving people open to abuse the system if this goes through. I had experience in my own family of somebody dying with motor neuron disease, and it's very, very difficult to see people fading away in front of you even. But still in all, the Lord gave us life, and the Lord shall take it away. And I think we should leave it at that and not to leave it in the hands of men. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. I've got Gordon Murray, then Carl McLean.
Chair, I would say that I agree with the recommendations. I think we should submit a corporate response, basically because maybe the Chief Executive can correct me. The public will have a chance to consult on this later, and we've been asked to consult on this by a local authority as health and social care employers and elected members. So I think we'd be abdicating our responsibility if we didn't tell our public how we feel about this. And we have a corporate response. And I think maybe before the Chief Executive submits the response, we could see it before that, and members might have the opportunity to opt out. But I think a corporate response is required. And if you're not going to move the recommendations, I would.
Councillor McLean.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Chair. Again, I'm not on your committee. Yeah, I've come in a wee bit late. I had to go out there, but you all know I've given a written response to this, and I've responded to the whole thing nationally as well. But I go along with what John Mackay and what Gordon say as well. I say, Mr. Fair says you go to see what's happening in Europe. The best example of this, of how badly it's been used, is in Canada. In Canada, they legalized it in 2015. In 2016, there was 1,500 deaths through assisted suicide. By 2019, that had risen to 5,500. We've got to be very, very careful for how we address this here. The title, look at the title, Assisted Dying for Terminally Ill Adults. It gives the impression that this refers to palliative care. It is nothing of the kind. Now, just the title itself is misleading. So the whole thing is misleading from start to finish, and I do oppose it. Whether we do it as Gordon Murray says that we should do it corporatively, I'm open for that.
Okay, thank you for that. I think we'll wind this up. I don't think there's any huge issue here. If I can just draw you back to the recommendations, which are we can readily accommodate what everybody wants here. And can I, first of all, thank people for their very sensitive sharing of very sensitive experiences. And I appreciate the seriousness with which we've treated this subject. And I don't want it to descend into some argument about whether we present it in a particular way or other. The recommendations have been written by Mr. Burr to allow for the Chief Executive to submit a response to the consultation based on the views expressed at this meeting. So the Chief Executive will submit a response based on the views expressed at this meeting. And if there's any additional views that you wish to feed into Mr. Burr, try and do it this week. Is that fair enough, Mr. Burr?
Yes, that would be most helpful if members could let me know of their views. If they wish to express them, there's no obligation to do that. But if they wish these to be reflected in the corporate response, could members do that? Can I say by next Monday, please, just to give me time to draft the letter and then circulate it if required. So by 5 p.m. next month, if that's possible.
So that being clear, I mean, the views have been quite well articulated. That being clear, can we now agree the recommendations that we consider what we want to issue a corporate response? People are quite happy for us to issue a corporate response in the terms outlined in C, which is that the Chief Executive will submit a response to the consultation based on the views expressed at this meeting. I think that's a fair reflection of how things have gone. Happy with that, members?
Leader, I've had my hand up for a while.
Okay, Ray McKenzie.
Right, thank you. I think actually there's been about 4 different views expressed here. No corporate view, and somebody is in favour of it, and 1 or 2 have been against it, and 1 or 2 have spoken in terms of consultation. And I think, personally, I mean, it's such a personal issue that I don't think that there should be a corporate consultation. I think it should be an individual consultation.
Yep.
And I don't think that this, sorry?
Okay, I'm not hearing anything you're saying is disagreeing with what we just agreed there, Ray.
Well,
we're not talking about a corporate view. We're talking about a corporate response. And that corporate response will encapsulate all the views that have been at this meeting. That's all.
At the end
so
of the day,
there is not a corporate view.
But that is...
Sorry?
Sorry, Leader, but that is basically the same thing. And we're only talking about 31 councillors here making a representation to the Chief Executive by whatever date you said. And that is not the point. If the public want to make representations, and I'm sure that a vast majority, I'm not saying, I think there's both sides of the argument have been put very well in the Chief Executive's report, but that's not the point. The point is that people should have the opportunity themselves of making representations, and I'm sure many hundreds of people probably will. And I don't think we should be putting in a majority view from this council among, from among a few councillors. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, I think you're unclear entirely about what we're doing here. People can submit their own views, and I hope they will submit their own views about this particular issue. We're not cutting across that. We are not submitting something from a corporate view that says a majority. All that the corporate response will say, these are the views that have been expressed. It is not about a majority or otherwise. Okay? Okay, with that in mind, can we now agree the recommendations?
Well, I don't accept that, but still.
Well, we can only go so long.
Yeah.
Okay, if we move on to the next item, which is item 9, COVID recovery funds. And thank you again for your contributions there. This report provides recommendations in regard to supporting economic recovery through the utilisation of unallocated COVID-19 funds. There was a meeting of the Budget Board in July, considered a range of priority areas for investment should funding be available. We agreed in Chamber that we should ensure that these followed whatever the corporate and economic recovery strategy said. They were further developed by the Director of Communities, and a further report was presented to the Budget Board on the 25th of November. And the outlined opportunities, which are detailed in Appendix A, are, as we asked, aligned with the Council's corporate and economic recovery strategies, and they provide a mix of opportunities across green, digital and community investment. The proposals also provide a mix of innovative and more traditional investment opportunities and represent a reasonable spread of activity across the islands. Again, all these things we asked the Director of Communities to include whilst he was preparing this. The majority of the proposals also carry reasonable prospects of securing match funding. Again, a key driver in putting these out. A reasonable prospect of securing match funding from key partners such as Highlands and Islands Enterprise. We've got Malcolm Barr, Calamian McKeever and Norm MacDonald here who will answer members' questions. And just a little bit of fine tuning, if I could, just before we just whether I agree these or whatever. I think there's two things that have been raised by particularly the Euston Barra independent group that's been raised through the Budget Board, and I've also had subsequent meetings with members and with Colin Mackenzie. And there's just two areas I just wish to highlight. One is that we have a pilot whereby we're looking at a pilot for an unadopted road down in Dallaborough, which is not for adoption, but to improve it. And we're going to try a pilot there because we can link that into the archaeological project, and we can link that into access. And we have to try and get a little bit smarter with all these projects of taking these access roads and trying to fit them into the actual project itself. What's the point of having a facility you can go to if it's difficult to get there? So we're going to try a pilot on that one with an unadopted road where there is community funding available and maybe council funding available and through this COVID fund, and then we'll see if we can put it all together as part of the project. That would be a heritage project. So I'm just saying to all officers when they're contemplating these projects, and Calamian McKeever is across this, that if there is potential for taking unadopted roads, particularly in Euston, I have to say Euston Barra, that we take these put them into the project. It's not that we're going to adopt them and have an ongoing cost, but if we can even improve them and let the community continue with them later on. That's one thing that will be considered through this. And the other thing is perhaps more particular, but we're going to look, because they are COVID funds, we've started discussions with Colin McKenzie and Tech Services looking at some sort of backup generation for Sacred Heart. It's an issue that's been on the cards for a while, and we thought this would be a good time to try and look at that as a project along with some security issues there. So that would be included within the context of these developments. They're just late, that's why they're not in the narrative, but I'm sure the UBIG members are aware of that. So that apart, they're quite exciting areas there for development. I don't know if members want clarification or amplification on any of these. We have the officers here, or if you're quite happy to agree these recommendations. Councillor Euston Robertson.
Just wanted to ask the Chief Executive in terms of heritage sector development, what's the second stage of developing this in terms of engagement with the Heritage Forum, for example, which covers the entire island chain? I just wondered how we go to the second stage, for example, in terms of discussions with the forum.
Is that for you, Colin?
I'll start off and hand over to the director. Leader, I mean, my view is the purpose of this funding, not all of it obviously, is to support the Heritage Forum to evolve and develop itself, and it will lead. It will largely lead phase 2 with our support that we have at last been able to put in place. I don't want to sound too vague on it, but that will be for the Heritage Forum working with us to take through, and it will be more or less from my perspective about the individual projects like Homecoming, but really delivering the strategy and the action plan, which we've never been able to support. Mm-hmm. But the director will have more detail on that.
Colin, would you like to come in?
All I would add to that, Leader, is it'll be a process of engagement with the forum. I think getting this first stage done and support into the forum is a good step forward. The models we've used in some of our other industry groupings, tourism, for example, through Outer Hebrides Tourism, where we've managed to get an industry body who takes forward development on its own behalf, but supported by the council and High. So that sort of model is a real opportunity for the forum, I think. So engagement with the forum, working at the speed that they think appropriate, and finding ways to support the forum going forward into the next stage is the way I see it developing.
Thanks for that. I think that's part of the issue that Euston Robertson has always been referring to, and that is we've got a great resource out there, so let's try and capitalise on that, and we'll facilitate as much as we can, as Colin and McKeever has outlined. Convener?
Thank you, Chair. In relation to the 5G trial, and believe me, in our community is a trial, and the princely sum of 30,000 is going to be used to try and improve the broadband in remote parts, and I do also know that there are other communities throughout the Hebrides that are still struggling with broadband as well. But to see that we're going to have £30,000 invested in a high altitude platform-based solution, whatever that is, and it's going to be delivered in July 2022, and I think that's a great feeling. I mean, broadband is absolutely vital to our communities right across the board, and I've also said here previously that without electricity, people wouldn't live in the communities they're currently living in, and the same is true today of broadband. And I think it's appalling that the work isn't being taken to its fullest extent. There are communities here who have fibre to premises, and I think that's something that we really do need to press. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can I bring in Chief Executive first?
Thank you, Leader. Again, I'll hand over to Calamian McKeever in a moment, but this funding is enabling funding. There's a lot going on with 5G at the moment, particularly in Orkney, and where Calamian and colleagues are working with Orkney Islands Council, particularly on these options. So we want to have some enabling funding hopefully supported by HIE, which will enable us to be at that table and support communities which have the kind of difficulties that we all know about and which the conveners acknowledged. But 5G can do an awful lot better than even some broadband solutions for limited purposes. It's not a replacement, but we do want to have that option, I think. But again, Mr. McKeever will have more detail on that.
Colmian?
Thanks, Leader. Thanks, Chief Executive. Yes, there are two issues here that we need to disaggregate. There's the broadband R100 rollout, which we discussed in detail at Sustainable Development last week. And I think the council was in agreement that the fibre has to be rolled out to all communities, and we shouldn't be accepting second-class solutions through vouchers, etc. So we continue to engage with the R100 team to make that case, and we will continue to press for broadband rollout. And I think the council has been quite clear that it's unacceptable for some communities in the Outer Hebrides to be left with a second-class service. What the 5G pilot trial is trying to do is test some new technologies to see, to make sure that we're keeping up with new technology as it goes on, and to try and develop some very specific Outer Hebrides solutions to this, and to try and move us ahead onto the 5G spectrum, potentially before some other areas. So this is very much a trial, a testing. It isn't the broadband solution, and we continue to pursue government for a full broadband solution.
Thank you for that, Mr. McKeever. Gordon Murray and then Norman MacDonald. Gordon Murray.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, I'm happy to hear about these late additions you mentioned, especially improving the unadopted roads in the Uist and Barra and the Sacred Heart facility. Just if you could arrange to circulate the details of that so that we can have it for information and we know exactly what's being invested in, that'll be most helpful. Thanks.
Yep, we'll arrange that. Councillor Norman MacDonald.
Thanks again, Chair. I'm not a member of your committee. I think with regard to the broadband scheme, we had this discussion at Sustainable Development last week. It's plainly obvious that with 98% of the country receiving some kind of speedy broadband, that the decision not to connect up the communities where it's become particularly difficult is not a technological one. It's one of desire to spend the money to do so. And this voucher scheme that they've drawn up to kind of compensate for the very few but significantly important in rural areas folk who cannot get connectivity is practically useless. It's a bit of a mishmash. So I think it's incumbent upon the government to provide the right amount of funding for these communities so that we can all get what has now become an accepted almost right. And if we're serious about arresting rural depopulation, it's imperative that we get these people connected as quickly as possible. And there's no reason why not with the right amount of investment we can't do so.
Yes, agreed. If the political will was there, we could get on with it. Okay, Councillor Alison MacLeod.
Thank you, Leader. Sorry, I commend this report. A lot of work's gone into it, and what I like about this are a good spread of projects throughout the islands. Nobody's been forgotten. And I think given the current post-COVID scenario, we have to move quickly and positively to kind of economic regeneration recovery. And these are the kind of projects that will help our community. We can draw in extra funds. So if we're going to have an economic bounce back, this is the best way forward. And I'm glad we have a corporate vision rather than us chopping and changing as we sometimes do. Let's get on with this. Let's move it along to the benefit of the whole community. So thank you, Colmian, for the report.
Indeed, thank you. So,
yeah, just to comment on that, Chair, there's an important line there. All of these opportunities are aligned with our corporate and economic recovery strategies. This is policy-led budget. This is policy-led decision making, and I think I'm pleased to see the response from the Chamber to these proposals.
Very good. Can we agree the recommendations? Thank you very much for that. On to item 10, which is a half-year Treasury report from Head of Accountancy and Exchequer Services, Norman MacDonald. The report is for noting and provides members with a summary of the Treasury management activity during the first 6 months of 21-22. The Treasury Management Strategy for 21-22, which was approved by the Council on the 3rd of February this year, included the recommended prudential indicator estimates for the year. The indicators have been updated as usual to reflect the changes to date and are shown in paragraph 10. Routine report, nothing untoward there. Anybody got any questions for Norman? Quite happy to note the report. Thank you very much. Item 11, again, second quarter capital monitoring for 21-22. Again, a report from Norman MacDonald. It's for noting again and provides an update on the progress of the 18-23 capital programme as at 30 September this year. It now totals 112 million, including additional grant funding for specific projects and the use of prudential borrowing and revenue contributions. Spend in the second quarter amounted to 9.4 million, with the main expenditure being in relation to major building projects, about which we've heard recently, the Lewis Residential Care, Bernard Bridge, as well as spend on regeneration grants, the new landfill cell, and of course Lochmaddy Pier Works. And the appendix to the report shows the detail at project level on progress and delivery of the programme. Again, for noting, Councillor Gordon Murray.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to ask on 6.5 to Mr MacDonald, there's a 31,000 to the Stornoway regeneration. What's the details of that? I'm sorry, I'm not up to date with the Stornoway regeneration and wondered if there was a recent report issued on that. And the other point I was going to make, just the excellent news on the Bridge Maintenance Fund and getting a fifth of that of the national funding is an excellent achievement. So just wanted to welcome that money from the Scottish Government.
Yeah, it was hard work for him. We're pleased to see it. Norman MacDonald, do you want to come back on that particular question from Gordon Murray about some Stornoway regen?
Thank you, Chair. I'm afraid I don't have the detail to hand for that, but I'll get back to Councillor Murray and maybe I'll just send an email to all members just to give a bit of detail on that.
Yep.
Thanks.
Fine, happy with that. Yep. Councillor Convener, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly at 6.2 there, I think I'd just like to record my thanks for the additional classroom that has been installed in New School, and that's a very positive thing for the community, and that the numbers of pupils in the school are increasing. And again, I think it's really important that we maintain our efforts in rural schools right across the islands.
I think we've got the convener's lineage to thank partly for that, but yes, it's a good news story. Item number, happy to agree that.
Chair.
Sorry, Kenny John MacLeod.
Just very briefly, I'm not quite sure if it's a combination of capital and revenue, but I'm aware of some concerns about the balance of funding available for adaptations through the care and repair and associated schemes like that, looking at the 2 years ahead. I think we discussed this before and we said, should there be any opportunity to bolster that funding, because in all probability it will run out before the end of the programme itself. And I think just plugging that up as an area of concern, I think we all want to support people living in their homes for as long as possible, and that funding makes that possible.
I think that's a very good point and a good reminder for us, actually, Councillor MacLeod. So can I ask the Chief Executive to take that one forward and have a look at it and see if we can? It's not a huge, it's a relatively modest amount, and it would be good if we could allocate funds to that. Okay, with that, can we agree and move on now to item 12, which is the second quarter revenue monitoring report? Again, routine. Anybody got any questions for Mr. MacDonald? No, thank you. And then on to item 13, therefore, which is the Ward Priority Fund 21-22. Again, a report from Norman MacDonald. It's proposing a timescale for the close down of the 21-22 Ward Priority Fund, in line, I think, with the way it's been done in the past. To be consistent with the start of this council, which will end in May 2022, it is proposed that any ward priority scheme for 22-23 will fall for the new members to disperse. With the council elections taking place in May 2022, the deadline for committing expenditure to be funded from ward priority funds will therefore be 31st of January 2022. Members should also note that the deadline for participating in Crown Estate, that's what we said earlier, can we get your Crown Estate funding decisions in also? So it's proposed that any carry forward of overspends from the current year will not be permitted, but any underspends will be allocated to the new member, to the new ward member. So if you don't, it's use it or lose it. Is that a clear message to everybody? Everybody clear on that? Councillor Norman MacDonald?
Thanks again, Chair. Norrie MacDonald, Skidrow. I'm not a member of your committee. Can I ask, going forward with the affected wards with regard to the reduction in the number of councillors, how the calculation will be based going forward?
And I take it will still be the same equal amount allocated to it's to individual councillors rather than to the ward, is it not?
Yes, that's how it's calculated, Chair. But we'll have to report to the newly elected council in the course of next year.
I don't think that's hardly fair. In a situation like we have down in Skira Road just now, where we're going from 3 councillors to 2, if you're basing the total amount on 2/3 of what we previously had, is the reduction in population due to the ward boundary changes 2/3? I don't think it is.
No, Chair, that's not what I'm saying. I think we will want to point out that there are a greater number of 2-member wards. And there may be a suggestion that the ward priority fund, if it continues, and that will be a choice for the new council as well, is maybe based on a ward allocation rather than a per member allocation. That's where my thoughts would be going for future policy, because we are moving from 3- and 4-member wards to a number of 2-member wards, and I think as Councillor MacDonald's indicated, the needs do not change that much. So I suspect we might look at a ward allocation rather than a per member allocation.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm guessing that's going to be based on population.
No, I think if it goes to war, it wouldn't be that sophisticated. I think it would just go to, there's a potential that what the Chief Executive is saying is a potential that in the new council that the ward allocation, that the ward funds will be based same amount for each ward rather than same amount for each member. Is that what you're alluding to? Yeah.
That'll certainly be an option, Chair. Yeah. Per population would lead to a significant change in the amounts being allocated.
Yep.
Well, I'm already for. I mean, I think if you've thought about what I've just said, Point Ward has changed, the boundary has changed, so we're losing a significant amount of people. Now that's going to go into Stornoway South, and if the allocation for Stornoway South is the same, they're going to have more people, so less ward funding per head, and we're going to have the same ward funding, more ward funding per head, which I will not argue with, but I can see somebody coming up with an argument against that.
Well, certainly will now.
Yeah, well.
Okay.
Okay. My fear was we'd lose something. So yeah. If we're going to gain something, I will retract everything I've said.
Too late. Too late. Okay, we'll leave it to the Chief Executive. Will look at these things and come back to us. But they're fair points, absolutely. The landscape is changing, and we do need to respond accordingly. So thank you for that input, Councillor MacDonald. Okay, so on that, everybody's clear. Use it or lose it. You've got the cut-off date, and we'll take it as everybody's happy with these recommendations. Thank you. Move on to item 14, which is write-off of debts. It's again Norman's report. It's recommending that irrecoverable debts totaling 15,800 in respect of council tax, sundry debts and housing benefit overpayments be written off. As usual, every effort has been made to recover debts due, and write-off recommendations are made only when all recovery routes have been exhausted. We're happy to. There's a recommendation for approval of that 3.1. We're happy to approve. I take it, Councillor MacDonald, you've got just got your hand up for my last. Yeah, okay. Happy to agree. Thank you. Item 15 is in private, and item 16 was referred to earlier by the Director for Investment, Ian McKinnon. It's a Barra and Vartashake Community Campus. This report provides an update on the progress of the Community Campus project and to reaffirm the Council's continuing commitment to housing with extra care as the model of social care for Barra and Vartashake. A summary of the progress to date is included in the body of the report, and a further update will be provided in the first instance to the Project Executive Board on the 16th of December this month, and the Council, the NHSWI Board and the Integration Joint Board as soon as possible thereafter. The recommendations for approval at paragraph 3.1. Is anybody wishing to speak to this report? Or we just want to take any questions?
I'm
Ian,
certainly
you're
happy
there. Sorry.
Yeah,
Yes,
I'm still here. Yeah, I mean, as you say, the reassessment exercise report, the consultative draft was published by Hub North Scotland in mid-November, and the Health Board Project Director and I are currently reviewing it to ensure that it is fit for purpose. We will be providing a further update to the board, as you say, in the middle of December. But it's probably fair to say that the biggest challenges facing the project are, first of all, the feasibility of us being able to physically fit all the buildings and the external facilities within the boundary of land owned by the council. It was an aspiration from the beginning that we would try to do that. There are some potential conflicts of priorities with regard to the Corla and the Health Board, in that one of the layout options has been revisited in terms of the construction programme. First sub-option of that would mean that there's no decant, no loss of sports facilities, no disruption to the school, a reduction in the cost of about £1.7 million, but it would mean a later delivery of the new health facilities. When I say later, I mean just the sort of latter stages of the wider construction period. The alternative to that would be an earlier delivery of the hospital and the GP facilities, but it would require decant of at least the primary school, the provision of a temporary games hall and the loss of the swimming pool, all for a period of nearly 2 years. So I think that there could be a potential conflict of priorities between ourselves and the Health Board in that respect. I suppose one of the biggest challenges that we're facing is the project cost, both in terms of the quantum of it and certainty. And notwithstanding that the costs suggested in July have been reduced, the current volatility in the construction market with regard to the cost and availability of materials, and perhaps even more so the availability and the appetite of subcontractors to work on Barra as opposed to work on sites closer to home, you could say. It means that we may not actually be able to secure the necessary confidence and certainty in the costs for the works until we've been able to conclude contractual terms with the delivery partner, at which time all that risk's passed to them. So that's a particular challenge under the current circumstances. And the other thing associated with cost is the affordability. Now, we have an existing funding package totalling some £51 million, and I think with a fair wind, with regard to enhanced contributions from both Scottish Government Health and Education, we could be able to increase this to as much as £60 million. But depending on what the preferred option is going forward, it could have a remaining shortfall of anywhere between £3 million, which is based on the adoption of the currently least expensive option, but as much as £12 million, depending on if we were to retain the original option 1D. So what we will have to do is develop a targeted strategy on how we would bridge that, and that would depend on how the revised estimated cost of the project is allocated across the primary shareholders, being the Corla, the Health Board, Health and Social Care Partnership and HHP. And we have had initial discussions with the relevant Scottish Government directorates and the Scottish Futures Trust. They are all already underway. But I have to say that we have to recognise that it may be that the Corla could be faced with the prospect of having to identify additional funding from within its own resources, whether it's the current or perhaps even future capital programmes. So as we said, we will be providing an update in the first instance to the Project Delivery Board in next week. And I think in the meantime, I would say that things are looking good but there are some significant challenges still out there. The other part of the report relates to housing with extra care, and I'll defer to Nick and colleagues in health and social care to talk about that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Ian. Mr. Pearce.
Yeah, so thank you. Just to share for members and to note that the plan with regard to kind of the model of care is very much around housing with extra care, as we kind of see sort of similar to the model of Goat Hill. I think what we will need to do from a community kind of perspective there is to help the community understand the benefits that model affords them, as opposed to the kind of current delivery model in the care home that we see in Barra. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Chief Exec.
Thank you. This is an important report, and there's a lot in it, and I think members should take time to go through the detail of it. The project is making considerable progress, but it is essential that we are in a position to go to government as soon as we can, but in such a way that we have detail and finality about what the project comprises and what we reasonably expect to be its funding demands. And part of that is reaffirming the commitment to housing with extra care. You may think, why is the Corley being asked to affirm this? Because this is an IJB matter, and you would be right. But of course, it involves our employees and our revenue budgets, and your role as elected members representing these communities is critical here. But the IJB will look at that commitment, and it is time that it did at its meeting next week, and it has been informed by the additional report which NHS commissioned from Buck and Associates. But I think the project, much has been done. It's been done in a very systematic way. It's been done working with civil servants and with Scottish Futures Trust, and we are moving, I think, to a conclusion, and this is part of that. The project board, just for members' information, meets every month. The chief executive of NHS and I co-chair that, and that, of course, is ensuring that the work is in a position to be submitted to government as quickly as possible. So, again, happy to take any questions or to speak to members out with the meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Chief Exec. Can I ask Paul Steele? Paul?
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, thanks for the report and the update. The point I was going to make was it was raised by Nick, just in terms of explaining the benefits or how the project's going to work to the community. I don't know if I've done that well enough so far. It's come to, with the Buchan report here, it goes into some detail, but I think there's ways we can do that better. Using examples, scenarios, etc., to explain to the community how it's going to work. And that's probably one for the IJB rather than here. But I think the work that's going on to get the final cost package in place, and what we're going to hear back from the project board hopefully soon will help us kind of decide what we're going to do going forward. So just a comment rather than a question. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Paul. Yeah, and I'm sure that we'll carry that into the project board yourself shortly. Councillor Manford, Donald Manford.
Thank you, Chair. I wish to strongly echo what Councillor Steele just said. I do quickly want to say echo also what the Chief Executive has said. This is a very important report at a critical time, and it bears reading, bears detailed reading. However, I will say that I support the recommendations, and sincerely hope they will be agreed. But returning to the points raised by Councillor Steele, the issues are very well laid out at 5.12, and it is absolutely critical that people understand the service, the delivery of the service that will come from these new buildings. And that is far from clear. And it's been a long-running, enduring concern. And when staff aren't certain or don't know what the future can hold in terms of service delivery, that permeates its way right through to the community. And that brings uncertainty and concern, fear even, right throughout the community. It's just very, very important that whoever the appropriate authority is gets to grip very quickly with the need for engaging with the staff, understanding what's going to happen, how services are going to be delivered, and to make sure the community is aware of that. The same is true not just of the care service, but it certainly stands out more there. I would also not want it to be overlooked that the same is true of the changes in education. That's the same is true there. And whatever, I've said this on numerous occasions, whatever the new ways of working that must come out of it, it must be clearly understood and to people feel comfortable with it. Thank you.
Okay, I think we need to try and address that particular issue because you have mentioned it previously, and we have here what looks like a brilliant and ambitious project, and it seems to be the only negative, or the primary negative I'm hearing, is simply that people aren't been given enough detail about the operational aspects of it going down the line. So I don't know. I think we need to make a concerted effort. My understanding is there's never been more information given out about a project since the history of man. But obviously, something is lacking that Councillor Manford has alluded to. So can I ask the Chief Executive to say what will be a way to address that going forward, or are there plans already?
There are always plans, Chair, and it has been an ongoing process, as you know, on my quarterly visits to Barra. I always engage with whoever wishes to engage with me in discussion on this, and that's been very good indeed. If it is time for a more organised engagement, I'm happy to do that in January. I think it would be best if my NHS colleague joined me in that, because this is a Corla IJB NHS project, and I could be parochial and say my main interest in this is education and council offices, but it is, of course, all the services to the community. So we will work with local members. We had Mr. McKinnon and I had a briefing meeting yesterday with the 4 local members, and I think that was the agreed way forward. So we'll take that forward early in the new year.
Okay,
as best suits the community, as we've always tried to do.
But I think what best suits the community is certainly that they hear from all interested parties, not just ourselves. So I think it's imperative that Health and IJB are supporting that and having input. Otherwise, it appears a bit disjointed. Thank you for that. Councillor Colm McLean.
Thanks, Chair. Again, I'm not a member of your committee, but like you, I've heard rumblings, particularly in the education field, about certain aspects of this project. So I would welcome what Mr. Burr has actually said about communication, especially. But that's not what wasn't my question. My question is on what Mr. McKinnon mentioned there. He said that there's a potential overspend in this project of between 3 and 12 million. My question is, how much overspend can we carry? That's the first part of it. And the second part, is this overspend, is it going to be shared amongst the Corla, IJB and NHS? Who's going to bear the brunt of it? Because it seems to me that in many of these projects, if we're engaging with the NHS, they want to offload their part of an overspend onto the Corla. So my question is, how much are we able to carry forward? 3 million to 12 million at this stage, more than likely will increase, as he knows, as Mr. McKinnon is quite aware of projects such as this, that will probably increase to probably between 5 and 20 million. But there again, that's just a retort. But the first is, how much can we carry of this overspend, and who is going to carry it?
Mr. McKinnon, I'm not sure if you want to answer that, but
I can certainly respond to that, and Councillor McLean is very correct in pointing out the difficulty that we're all having at the moment in trying to achieve a degree of cost certainty under the current circumstances. I think the use of the word overspend is probably slightly incorrect, in that what we're trying to do just now is to balance two sides of an equation in terms of project cost and the availability of the funding package. Now, until we're in a situation where the funding package, and it is a multi-agency funding package, it's made up of contributions from health, from the Corla, from Scottish Government Learning, from Police Scotland, from Hebridean Housing Partnership and More Homes Division. So it's quite a complex patchwork quilt of funding. So until we are able to have a complete balance of project cost on one side of the equation and the funding package on the other side of the equation, then the project is not really going to go very much further. So it's trying to bridge that shortfall in the context of quite significant challenge in terms of cost certainty. That is one of the main issues. In terms of where funding is going to come from, there are various processes in trying to identify where best it comes from. But at the moment, what we've done is we've looked at the total project cost. We've allocated that across the Corla, the Health Board, HHP, etc., all the sort of key shareholders within the project, and then tried to target those individual organisations to address those individual shortfalls. But the difficulty around that is that what that tends to do is it continues the principle of working in silos. And what we really want to be able to do is between ourselves and the Health Board, we've been working with this as a single project for the last 3 years, and we need Scottish Government to also consider it as a single project and for everybody to work together in addressing a shortfall. I think if we're at the lower ends of that shortfall being £2.5 to £3 million, I don't think it was so much of a challenge. But obviously, if it's more than that, and I mentioned £10 to £12 million, then that's a major challenge going forward. I have to say, government are extremely committed across all the relevant directorates to the project in its entirety. It's probably a pathfinder project in terms of what's called place-based investment. So there's very keen interest in the project and for its success going forward. And I'm confident that as long as we are in the regions of £3 to £5 million, the Scottish Government, as a wider body, will step up to the mark in due course.
Okay, that's a very full explanation. You can understand why Councillor McLean got a bit uncomfortable about the word overspend, and we were going to approve overspend. So these are merely budget shortfalls that we hope will be addressed by others and not ourselves. But thanks for that detailed explanation. And thanks for the question, Councillor McLean. Okay, are we happy therefore to agree the recommendations? There's two recommendations there at 3.1. Committee happy to agree? Thank you very much. Now we move on to item 17, which is climate change. It's a report for noting. It provides an update on the Council's progress on climate change. The Council has set up an internal climate change group and is establishing a governance structure to progress climate change matters. An action plan to reduce the Council's carbon footprint and work towards zero direct emissions is being developed. The Council is also working with partners to support the islands to reach net zero and to build resilience to future and expected effects of climate change. And in parallel with this work, a climate change strategy has been developed. Norma is here to answer any questions. Norma, did you want to speak to the report or?
No, thank you, Chair. There's nothing really further for me to say at this point, but I'm happy to take any questions. And Anna Hume, who wrote the report, is also here if there's any more detailed questions.
Okay, so we've got Norma and Anna in attendance. Has anybody got any questions? I'm sure we'd all welcome this piece of work and progress in this particular area. Okay, happy to accept and for noting. Thank you very much. Thank you, ladies. And item 18 is reports outstanding. Nothing particular in there. We've got one item in private, which is item 15. So I'll allow Derek to tell me when we can go into private.